Dear friends, I want to share with you a real sensation that has blown up not only British YouTube, but also all social networks. We are talking about the performance of the legendary comedian Rowan Atkinson, whom most of us know as the unique Mr. Bean. But this time Atkinson appeared before the public not in a comical image, but as a sharp and insightful critic of the system. In his speech, he literally demolishes the modern foundation of British democracy, as well as freedom of speech, which, in his opinion, has long been under threat. This is not just a joke for the sake of a show. These are the very words that many are afraid to say out loud. Atkinson, in his intelligent but ruthless manner, says that democracy, as it was presented in the West, has actually outlived itself a long time ago. It simply does not exist. According to him, all that remains of the once mighty ideals of freedom are empty slogans that hide the control and suppression of opinions. There is no more freedom of speech, Atkinson declares, and his words echo throughout the UK and then beyond. It is not often that one hears from a representative of Western culture such a straightforward and audacious condemnation of a political system that seemed to be a model for the whole world. Friends, get ready to hear not just hilarious jokes, but also strong, bold thoughts that make you think. Atkinson has managed to combine his inimitable humor with harsh political satire, creating a truly powerful effect. So, friends, let's go. Before I show you the most striking episode from Atkinson's speech, I'll say a few words. The UK's democracy, according to the satirist, has turned into a one-way game where the rights of minorities are defended to the point of absurdity, while the majority opinion is simply ignored. The system, which was supposed to serve all citizens, now supports only those who are convenient and beneficial to the authorities. But it's not just the UK. More and more voices in the Western world are saying that freedom of speech and democracy are becoming an illusion. One of these voices recently became the nephew of the third President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr. In his acclaimed interview with Tucker Carlson, he accused the U.S. authorities of putting pressure on large social networks, forcing them to promote only information that benefits certain political groups. Meanwhile, the situation in the UK is becoming increasingly tense. The wave of protests against migration policy, rising crime and social unrest have shown that people have stopped believing in the government's ability to solve real problems. Democracy, which was supposed to be a pillar for the whole society, seems to be increasingly concerned about protecting the interests of narrow groups, ignoring the vast majority of the population. Rowan Atkinson brings all this dirt to the fore in his speech, showing that the modern West has much deeper problems than it seems at first glance. He asks the main question: was democracy at all the way it was painted, or is it all just a facade that hides tight control and suppression of dissent? So, friends, let's watch the first part of this vivid performance and evaluate everything for ourselves. Atkinson begins with a powerful quote. "My starting point when it comes to considering any issue related to freedom of speech is my deep conviction that the second most important right is the right to express oneself freely. The most important thing in life is the food in your mouth, and the third most important thing is a roof over your head. But for me, the number two constant position is freedom of expression right after the need to maintain life." Atkinson stresses that, due to his public status, he is unlikely to ever be arrested for violating free expression. But what really worries him is the fate of people who are less protected than he is. He cites examples where people have been jailed for questioning the orientation of a police horse, jokingly of course, or for calling the Church of Scientology a sect. He also mentions a cafe owner who was arrested for showing Bible passages on a TV screen. This absurdity, according to Atkinson, reminds him of a sketch in which he participated many years ago, where he portrayed the situation with a racist policeman who arrested a black man on ridiculous charges. Atkinson wonders who would have thought that laws would allow art to be imitated so accurately, and how quickly reality turned into a caricature of itself. He gives an example of how the cases of the Rainbow Horse and Scientology were closed only after they attracted public attention, which clearly showed how the system supposedly protecting freedom actually works for the hidden interests of the authorities. These are such bitter reflections, friends. But what about the thousands of other cases that did not receive such media coverage, which were not absurd enough to attract attention? Even in cases where cases were closed, people were still arrested, interrogated, brought to trial, and then released. Friends, before I show you the second part of Rowan Atkinson's speech, I want to share a few thoughts that may turn out to be very disturbing. To begin with, the very fact that the man who gave Mr. Bean to the world suddenly became a symbol of protest against modern political realities is surprising. Isn't that right? This artist, known for his subtle sense of humor, finds the strength to ridicule the hypocrisy of the authorities and question the sacred cow of Western democracy. But what is really important here? Atkinson doesn't just make the audience laugh. His words strike right at the heart of the modern political system, where the privileged can afford to criticize, while ordinary people simply lose the opportunity to be heard. He makes it clear that if you are famous, rich, or have a high social status, your voice can be heard. But what about ordinary citizens? What about the millions of people who face a system that ignores them every day? It seems to bring to life the paradox from Orwell's work, Animal Farm, where everyone is equal, but there are those who are more equal. And here we are faced with a global problem that covers not only the UK, but the whole world. Look at the current political situation in major countries. Political parties that enjoy the support of 20 to 25% of the population are in power. I'm referring to Europe, where others are forced to simply watch as decisions are made that they don't like at all. Take Germany, for example, where the ruling coalition is facing unprecedented challenges. The recent elections in Thuringia were a real disaster for the ruling party, whose policies over the past 2.5 years have led the country to an economic crisis. Germany, once considered an economic giant, is losing its power before our eyes, and now the ruling coalition is popular with only 16% of Germans. That's just terrible. And now, friends, listen to what Atkinson says next. This is censorship of the most frightening type, which, as Lord Dear said, is guaranteed to have a chilling effect on freedom of expression and protest. The Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights, as you may know, summed up the whole issue very well, stating, "While arresting a protester for using threatening or offensive language may, depending on the circumstances, be a proportionate response, we do not believe that language or behavior that is only offensive should ever be criminalized." The obvious problem with the ban on insults is that too many things can be interpreted as such. All this makes us think about how far we have come in terms of controlling freedom of speech and expression. Criticism is easily perceived as an insult by certain parties. Ridicule, sarcasm, unfavorable comparison, simply expressing an alternative point of view regarding orthodoxy. All this can be interpreted as an insult. It is not surprising that so many statements are perceived exactly as the examples I mentioned show. Although the law under discussion has been in existence for more than 25 years, it is an indicator of a culture that has been established in the programs of successive governments seeking, with reasonable and good intentions, to limit the abhorrent elements in society. Instead, a culture has been created that is extremely authoritarian and controlling. This is what can be called a new intolerance, a new one, but with an intense thirst to silence uncomfortable voices and dissent. I am not intolerant like many people, often highly educated and world-minded, who say, "I'm only intolerant of intolerance." People usually nod and agree, but if you think about it for at least 5 seconds, it becomes obvious that all they are promoting is replacing one kind of intolerance with another, which, in his opinion, is not progress at all. Underlying bias, injustice, or discontent is not eliminated by arresting people. They are not eliminated by discussion, argumentation, or problem-solving, preferably outside the legal process. For me, the best way to increase society's resilience to offensive or unpleasant speech is to allow it to be heard much more often. As with childhood illnesses, you are better able to withstand those that you have already encountered. We need to strengthen our immunity to insults so that we can deal with the problems that completely justified criticism can raise. Our priority should be solving problems, not attacking the one who raises it. As Barack Obama said in his speech at the General Assembly, laudable efforts to restrict speech can become a tool to pressure critics or oppress minorities. The most powerful weapon against hateful speech is not suppression, but more words. That's the gist of my thought, more words. If we want to create a sustainable society, we need a more sustainable dialogue. This should include the right to insult or offend. And even if, as Lord Dear says, the freedom not to be offended is not freedom at all. Repealing this clause will only be a small step, but I hope it will be an important step in a long-term project to suspend and gradually move away from the growing culture of censorship. Friends, the most significant message in Rowan Atkinson's words, it seems to me, is his conclusion. In a world that prides itself on its democracy, there is a growing trend towards censorship today. Increasingly, the authorities are resorting to restrictions on freedom of speech if someone dares to criticize the current political course or simply has an alternative point of view. What happens to those who disagree? They are simply excluded from the public field. Take, for example, the recent arrest of Pavel Durov, the creator of Telegram, in Paris. This decision, to put it mildly, raises a lot of questions. Is this really a defense of freedom of speech, which Western countries so often talk about? In fact, it's not about freedom at all, but about the desire to control one of the most powerful media resources, which Telegram has become, uniting more than 1 billion users around the world. The task of the authorities now is not to allow people to freely exchange information, but to take control of every socially significant resource in order to strengthen their influence. And now I would like to express my opinion, friends. After listening to Rowan Atkinson's speech, I cannot but express my deep gratitude for his courage to speak the truth openly and directly. His words about censorship, freedom of expression, and a new type of intolerance sound like a breath of fresh air in a world where alternative points of view are increasingly suppressed and constructive criticism is perceived as a threat. It is especially important that Atkinson, being a world-famous figure and beloved by millions, uses his platform not only for entertainment, but also to raise pressing social issues. This is an example of how personal responsibility and the voice of a public figure can change the discourse around key issues of modern society. I was particularly hooked by his idea of the need to strengthen immunity to insults through more frequent and open dialogue. This is a really important observation because prohibitions never solve problems, but only drive them into the shadows. You need to be able to listen and respond, not punish for unpleasant words. I sincerely thank Rowan Atkinson for his honesty and ability to hit the target accurately. What do you think, friends? Is the actor right? Be sure to write your opinion in the comments, as long as we are allowed to share it on the internet at all. I want to thank you for your attention and wish you good health. See you later.